Hi, everybody. It's Christina Holloway here. I thought that I would share today one of the presentations I did recently on influence and persuasion. I'm going to include it here in a minute. And the presentation actually includes my take on Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. And if you've never read the book, I highly recommend you get it and you read it. So this is my interpretation of the 6 points that he makes, the 6 influence types that he outlines in his book. And then I go into the different personality types and how persuasion techniques work for each personality out there. Again, I think I outlined 6 different personality types and how influence techniques, specifically related to Robert Cialdini's outline, how they work for different personalities. Again, a quick disclaimer, and you'll see this in the presentation. Most of the reason that I go through this is not to create influence and persuasion as a way to manipulate people into doing what you want. And Robert Cialdini's book actually illustrates how influence can be used to be manipulative and how we can protect ourselves from manipulative influence techniques. At the same time, I believe if we take a look at his book and his influence techniques and we turn them around and ask ourselves, how can I be more influential? How can I use influence and persuasion to just get my point across, increase my influence on the people around me who are decision makers? How can I, get more clients if I have a business? Help them understand that the solutions I'm creating will benefit them. Or even if I have a career and I want to get ahead and I want to get promoted, how can I influence or persuade people to understand that I'm here to help or I have something of value to offer? So that's the gist of this presentation. And with that, I'd like to get started. So hope you enjoy it. Don't forget, follow, click like, hit the bell for notification, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought. Happy to have open discussion. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Holloway, and I'll be presenting tonight for Successfully Influence Others, How Thoughtful Persuasion Can Set You Apart. Thank you, Bruce, for inviting me to speak tonight to your audience, and I appreciate the opportunity. So let's get started. Today, we're going to discuss the 6 key principles of influence for positioning yourself as a successful leader. We'll also discuss a simple yet powerful framework that will help you take your influence and persuasion to the next level. And at the end, I'm going to share with you some bonus material as a thank you for attending today's event. Now, I'm going to make an offer that if you have any questions or if you'd like to follow up with me or if anything struck you as interesting, feel free to send me an email, christina@christinaholloway.com. All right, so a quick introduction. My name is Christina Holloway. I've had a business for, we're going on 20 years now. I started in consulting for major tech consulting firms, and I worked as a project manager, selling project management plans and initiatives to major Fortune 500 marketing and communication departments. I've navigated up and down the chain of command, and 5 years ago, I pivoted into coaching. So I've now since been an executive coach, working mostly with Fortune 500 companies. Some of my biggest clients include Google, Accenture, and Spotify. And I've also been working with tech startups and 2 incubators, one based out of Chicago and one based out of Silicon Valley. Those 2 I've been working with the past 4 years. My focus is on leadership development in terms of how I work with executives at large corporations. And in addition, I spend a lot of time working with tech startups and small businesses on figuring out their brand, their positioning, their messaging, and working with people who need to get a better understanding of their personal brand. One other thing really exciting is in the past 2 months, I was named the #1 executive coach in Chicago by Influence Digest. That's been quite an exciting moment. In addition, I'll talk about that further into the presentation. It's important. So let's get started. So what is influence? So today we're going to talk about a book by Robert Cialdini called Influence. And we're also going to talk about the book Nudge by Sunstein. And those two books together really give us a clear idea what influence really is and how it impacts the people around us. So Robert Cialdini explains that the ability to produce a distinct kind of automatic compliance from people, a willingness to say yes without thinking first, is the impact of influence. He calls this a click whir. So the stimulus, which is the ask that we're trying to make when we try to influence somebody, is the click, and then the whir is them making the automatic decision to say yes because there's trust. There's some sort of relationship that immediately happened that made somebody make this decision, and we're going to go into what those circumstances are. So let's get into it. So, according to Robert Cialdini's book, there are 6 different influence types. Now, a quick reminder that Robert Cialdini's book, if you've read it, that's great. If not, make sure you do pick it up. It's an excellent read. But his book is intended. The point of view of his book is to explain to us that around us, anywhere we go, the things we see, the ways we interact with others, influence is always at play. And that his position is, I'm going to educate you on the 6 different or most popular ways that other people can influence your decision making. And the more I've educated you on these 6 different types, the more you can be aware of it and skirt some of the impact that influence can have on my decision making. How do I make authentic decisions without too much influence around me? Now, for me, of course, what I want to do is take that and turn it on its head as well and say, that's true. We do get influenced all around us on every single day. However, at the same time, how can I, as a person who's just trying to navigate the world, just trying to, get promoted or sell some of my products or services to new clients, or just show up and do simple things like buy a car or go to the movies? How can I use influence myself as a way of just helping me develop this slight edge, or even more so, figure out how to create smoother relationships so that people understand where I'm coming from? So in these terms, we're going to look at influence as we use it as a tool in an ethical way. And the best way to use influence is when it's a win-win. When I'm trying to get something or show you something and you're buying into it, you're believing me, mostly because we've established trust. And we know that I'm not trying to take advantage of you. And the person who agrees into this verbal contract also understands this person is acting in my best interest, and I'm happy to engage in the purchase or whatever interaction we're trying to do. So this is the perspective we're using when we talk about influence. So let's get started. So number 1 is reciprocity. What I'm going to do is go through all 6 of these, and then after that, we're going to talk about persuasion techniques and why they're important in terms of how we're going to use these influence techniques. So reciprocity, the way Robert Cialdini explains it, is we have an automatic, almost unconscious way of reciprocating when somebody does something for us. So a really great example that he provides is if you've ever had the circumstance of receiving a Christmas card that comes late, and you're obligated almost to write out a Christmas card and send it back. Well, this person went through the effort of mailing me a Christmas card, and even though it's further into the month, I'm going to turn around and send them another one too, because that's the least I can do to be polite. Another way of showing reciprocity is, and these are simple examples, is if you're at a restaurant and the two of you are going to eat and you decide you're going to order dessert. So the first thing you're going to do is offer the other person some of your dessert, and they'll automatically say, yes, thank you, and I'll share my dessert with you as well. It's almost an automatic response. So what we do want to learn, though, from reciprocity is that people do things for their reasons, not for your reasons. So if we take the dessert example for one, say I order a dessert and I want to share it, or I want to make sure that Christina is sitting on the other side of me and I want to share some of her cake as well, and I order cheesecake. Now, Christina, I'm not a big fan of cheesecake. So if you were to sit across from me at the table and order it, I'm not going to really reciprocate. I'm going to say, no, thank you. So these are for my reasons, not yours. So reciprocity is only going to work if we understand the person that we're actually dealing with. So we're compelled to reciprocate for reasons that only we can understand. And to influence someone, we must understand their point of view first. So you want to ask yourself, how can you use reciprocity strategically? Going back to the restaurant example, I'm going to say, you know what? I understand that Christina really isn't a cheesecake person. So maybe this time I'm going to order a key lime pie because all I care about is she always orders a big piece of chocolate cake and I want a piece of that. So now we understand. I'm going to be strategic. I'm going to make sure I make the right choices. And I'm going to offer reciprocity as a way to make sure that I've built a relationship between the two people. Why or how is by making smart choices. So the number 2 is commitment and consistency. Robert Cialdini gives a great example. When we're talking about commitment and consistency, it means if I'm willing to make a commitment to you, I'm more likely to be consistent if the act has to come up. So his example is someone goes to the beach, goes into the water and leaves their wallet and in front of a group of people, and somebody steals the wallet. Well, these people do not intervene. They found out that 90% of the time they don't really intervene. They come back the next time and they do another scenario, and the person leaves their blanket and says, "Excuse me, could you please watch my things?" And when we get the commitment is when they say, "Yes, of course, certainly, I'll watch your things." And they go into the water and somebody comes by to steal the wallet and they intervene. Why? Because they've committed to watching their things and they've committed to a total stranger. And it's amazing how it works. These are total strangers and they've said, "Yes, I agreed to watch your things," which means if somebody's going to try to steal it, I'm going to get up and say something. 90% of the time, somebody did. They got up and they said something and said, "I'm sorry, you cannot take that. This belongs to someone else and I'm watching their things." So in terms of how we can use it, if you don't ask for what you want, you won't get it. Making assumptions about the people around you and thinking they're going to do the right thing, even if you haven't set up the scenario for them to do that, isn't going to work. So in this instance, we enjoy showing off our sense of integrity. So to influence somebody, you must understand what they value. And then ask yourself, how are you a choice architect in your everyday life? So when it comes to this, commitment and consistency dovetails very nicely with the book Nudge. And in that sense, they use the term choice architect, which we've all done this. So say you, again, we're going to go into food because I just ate. But anyway, so if you're going out to lunch with a friend, you can say, "What do you want for lunch?" And the person can just say, "I don't know, whatever." Well, that's not helpful. So if you create choice architecture, you'll say, "What would you like for lunch, Italian or Chinese?" And you've now given them a choice, and you've really driven how the choice is going to happen. Well, I'm happy to eat either one, but I feel like Chinese today. So what you've done is created the choice for them. You've allowed them to have a successful outcome, and they're going to be consistent by telling you this, giving you an answer, and then following through with it. So in this example, we're talking about, again, strengthening the relationship by allowing the person to have choices and then coming back to you and saying, "Yes, I choose this." They feel empowered. Number 3 is social proof. So it's a loaded one. We've seen it, and it's exploded lately with the onset of all these social media platforms. And in fact, I may not be accurate, but my influence book is from 2007. And I looked up Instagram, which wasn't out until 2010. So the examples that Robert Cialdini gives in his book are before the impact of some of the biggest social media platforms that are out there today, Instagram and TikTok, and the such. So when we're looking at social proof, what we see is that people enjoy being around other people who are similar. So in order to use social proof, it's called building relationships while getting results. We know that social media platforms overall are tools for building relationships. This is how I reach out to people, even LinkedIn. I'm creating relationships on LinkedIn. I'm sharing my data. I'm sharing my information. And others who agree with my point of view are following me. And I use Kylie Jenner because as much as we do or do not like them, the family, we do understand that they've had an enormous impact. And many marketing and communications departments and institutions are looking at the way they use social proof as a way to absolutely expand everything they touch, along with effective sales sales programs and effective product placement and product development. So social proof is most powerful when we see the behavior of people just like us. So if we were to talk about the Kardashians way very early, much, much earlier than they are today, their reality show was very simple. It was a bunch of average looking girls. They were not supermodels. They were not, I guess, before their enhancements. They were pretty average, and they wouldn't be considered anything special. But they were fun, they were close knit, and they were entertaining. So they had this show, and we could imagine ourselves having friends like that, or saying, you know, you're just like those girls. And the likeness then, the social proof then, was how much people related to them, and that's what drove a lot of their popularity. And of course, they leveraged it for bigger things, which took them in a whole other direction. So to influence someone, you must first understand what you have in common with them. And these women have done this in a just stupendous way, is finding the likeness or the social connection, and then using it to leverage it for bigger things. So we want to ask ourselves, if we're going to use social proof for ourselves, and it doesn't have to be social media, but what we're asking, why would someone want to work with me, and where would I fit in best? So even this could even work with finding your niche for a business, working in a department where you feel more comfortable. You don't want to be a fish out of water. So you're looking for areas where you have likeness or likability, and then you're building those relationships in that sense, which is going to take us into number 4, which is liking. So I find that social proof and liking are pretty similar, but I'll explain to you the differences between the two. So in liking, influence happens one person at a time. So let me just go back to my notes, because I had just written some material on liking, and this was what I differentiated it in this way. Liking has to do with the likability factor. So it's not just about people liking you, it's about making sure you can stand in your authentic self and be honest about what you value for career success, and making genuine connections with the people around you who can help you advance. So we're more likely to buy from someone who's familiar to us because we like what we know. And when we say buy, this is also getting hired. Somebody just asked me today, well, how does this translate to getting the hiring process? And in essence, when we create our resume, we're actually creating the sales sheet, and we're trying to sell our skills and experiences so that our employer will want to work with us and hire us. So somebody's more likely to understand who we are and where we come from if they find familiarity. Now, the biggest, easiest example is buying a car. So in this example, to influence someone, you must understand how they form trust. And when I went to buy a car many years ago, the dealership, I had the salesperson come up to me and say, well, why are you looking for a car? And I'd say, well, I have a hobby. I like to go biking, and I like the bike trails. And he'd say, oh, that's wonderful. Have you tried these bike trails over here? I love those ones over there. Or have you been to these other ones? And then he'd say, well, what else are you interested in? So immediately he created likability. He made me understand that he has something in common with me, and he shared information that I might find valuable. And in the process, he also explained to me, you know, you're looking at these cars over here, but these aren't necessarily the best ones for attaching a bike rack and putting your bike on it. You might want to try this model over here. Let's take it for a test drive and see how you like it. So in sales, likability and the likability factor are quite important. They're compelling, and they work very effectively. So we want to ask ourselves, how are you showing up authentically to contribute to having high likability? And you have to understand that to influence someone, you must understand how they form trust. So on the 5th one, scarcity is extremely popular. This is one where many, you'll see it everywhere. You might get an email, especially now with the holidays coming, there's big sales. Make sure you grab your discount. The sale ends at the end of tomorrow. Don't miss out. If you miss it, you won't see it again. Make sure if you want to do the webinar, there's only 10 seats left. Make sure you get your space. All of this is intended to generate interest in wanting to close your decision. So scarcity works best for people who are on the fence. I'm not sure I want to go to that event. I'm not sure I want to buy that. Well, if you do it in the next hour, you get 50% off. And it's intended for me to help you make a decision and help you move forward with that decision, knowing that I believe the decision that you want to work with me or the decision that you want to purchase from me is going to make your life better. That's always where I'm coming from when I create scarcity. So one example, if you work at a company, a really great example here is, let's say you have a project and you need to grab 10 people to get on your team. You know that it's a high value project. There's going to be a lot of people watching you and making sure that you get in on time, under budget. And you walk around the floor asking everybody, would you like to be on my project? And slowly, one by one, they all say, well, I don't know, I kind of have other projects to do, I'll skip this one, and you at the end of the day have nobody. Now, if we use a scarcity technique, what we can say is, I have a high value project. I'm going around asking people who wants to be involved. I only have 10 spots available. There's 35 people on the floor, and I'll be asking each one of you to come in and interview with me so that I can grab the top 10 people to sit on the project, because it's going to be high visibility. And if we get it in on time and under budget, this is going to be a feather in our cap. So, stay tuned for the emails. Well, you've now generated interest and you've generated a little bit of competition. There are people who, no matter what it is, are going to compete. And you've also explained to them that it isn't just, I'm going to ask you to be on my team. You've now told them you could be one of a select few. Do you want to join us on this project? Some of the most successful scarcity, and I included an example here, is Open House Chicago, is where you, for 1 week, and you can see it says October 16th to November 1st, for 1 week in the entire year, they open up the biggest architectural buildings with the biggest history in the city of Chicago, and people come in droves for 1 week, and they wait in long, massive lines all over the city so they can go behind the scenes of some big iconic buildings, and they anticipate it. They wait for registration. They look forward to it every year. Restaurants capitalize on it by having specials where you can sit outside and you can watch people waiting in huge lines around the city. And the scarcity technique is the most effective. It is quite effective as long as we use it in a kind way that just helps people make a decision if they're sitting on the fence. This is one of the most effective ways to do it. So again, we're looking at these first 5 are, how do you build a relationship with somebody else by using certain techniques to help them make a decision that's going to be not only in your favor, but also in their favor. But when we look at number 6, authority, this is what I find to be the differentiator in these influence techniques, is that Robert Cialdini explains authority, and we go into the example in a minute. But what I find unique is that authority is something that we can create on our own. This is the self-exercise. It's the exercise that I can do by myself without needing to build relationships with other people in order for it to be effective. So I can create my own sense or level of authority, and I can use that as a way to help people understand who I am and why I can help them. If I use authority effectively, the other 5 will fall into place pretty well. So in authority, they give the example, and it's funny. Oh, here, take 100% responsibility for your impact on others. Why? You'd be shocked to find that it really doesn't take much to consider someone an expert. And in Robert Cialdini's example, we talk about a famous experiment where people put on white coats. They went out and asked people to volunteer for a science experiment. They had an actor pretending in the other room, and they said, if he gets the answer wrong, shock him. So they'd keep shocking him, and they'd increase the frequency, and the actor would pretend he was in more and more pain. And what did we find out? These people complied. They constantly increased the shock higher and higher. Why? Because the guy was wearing a white coat. And I trusted that there must have been some reason to be doing this kind of exercise. And I believed that if I was involved in this exercise, that I was doing good for the scientific community. Now, that was a way of showing how people are compliant and believe authority, even if it's just perceived authority. For us, though, we have many avenues where we can start establishing our authority. So positioning yourself as an authority in your field is as simple as telling your own story. So you want to ask yourself, how does my perceived authority impact the people around me? So again, I'm going to go back to the Influence Digest and being ranked the #1 executive coach in Chicago. Well, I'll tell you, nobody talked to me and nobody told me I got the ranking, and nobody interviewed any of my clients. And I would have argued with them. I don't know that I'm the #1 coach. I work side by side with a number of other coaches who are really wonderful. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, I'm better than they are. It's not true. However, what I found is I had positioned myself pretty strongly in the algorithm on LinkedIn. How did I do that? Well, I wrote up my profile. I filled it out. I was about 97% completed, or even 100%. And then I included a lot of my content. So all of the articles where I've been published, all of the webinars that were actually available for free online, anywhere where I could show this is who I am, this is my point of view, this is who you're going to deal with if you decide to engage with me. I have regular people who are constantly trying to friend me, and they come to me for opportunities, including speaking engagements, etc. And I'm adding all of that onto my LinkedIn profile. What have I done? I've positioned myself as an authority in my field, and then the algorithm picked me up and said, in the Chicago area, according to our LinkedIn algorithm, she's showing up pretty high. So here's how I can illustrate to you what authority looks like. Did I need other people in order to buy into what I was saying? I'd argue not really. I mean, I had people who were looking at it, and it doesn't mean that it was a lie. I certainly am positioning myself as an authority in my field for this particular area, but more and more people are buying into it, mostly because I'm having, like we showed, social proof and likability. So now what we see is more things start churning up for you. You get more opportunities. People start reaching out to you. Hey, I saw that you were the #1 coach over there. That must be pretty exciting for you. What else have you been working on? And it can be a snowball effect. So in true to form, this is my favorite part of how we read the book and how we interpret the book. Clearly, he had his own way of showing this, but for me, my interpretation is the first 5 are great for building relationships and making sure people agree to the interaction that you're going to have. And the 6th one is, how do I do it myself? Because sometimes those others don't work that well if you're not doing it right, or you're off a little bit, or like the negotiation with cheesecake, maybe you buy cheesecake one time too many and people just don't go into it. They're not going to reciprocate with you. We learn as we go. But with authority, the more we build on it, the more we add to it. It's a nice slow process, or it can be very fast, but we know that we're going to see results because the more we put out there, the more we're going to see come back to us. Okay, so these are the influence techniques that Robert Cialdini outlines in his book. And now we're going to move into, here they are, the top 6, the first 6. So there's reciprocity, there's commitment and consistency, there's social proof, there's liking, there's scarcity, and there's authority. So that's what we've discussed so far. Okay, so if we're going to go into persuasion, I'm going to go through very quickly with you just on this slide what a persuasion framework looks like. And what we want to use is, we're going to take the influence techniques that Robert Cialdini outlined. In particular, I find authority to be quite effective here. However, we're going to look at all the different ones and just play around with it a little bit. And then we're going to look at this persuasion framework. So clearly there's 6 steps, and it's pretty simple. So we don't need to go into detail for each step, but understanding the different influence techniques would probably be the first step, and we've just done that. And then set goals for yourself on what you want to achieve. So clearly, we'll take the example of this person who needs to build a team for a big project. I'm going to figure out which one of the persuasion techniques is going to work best for me, and then assess the situation and the people involved. I need to know, of all those 35 people, who are the 10 that I would prefer, and then who are the 10 that are most likely going to end up agreeing to do this, right? So there's going to be 2 lists. And then choose the right appeal. Now that's the one where I'm going to dig deep. We're going to look at that next. And once we choose the right appeal, we're going to structure the approach based on the influence persuasion combination. So we'll just use this example as we continue forward. And then, as usual, rehearse, always plan for the worst. And then we said, have a backup plan of who your second list is if you don't get your first people. So when we're picking the appeal, we're figuring out exactly who the people are. So if we're going to use the example that we have of who are the people that are involved, like in this mock scenario of people who are in my department. So if I want to create a persuasion a campaign, and try to get a number of people to be onto my team, I need to figure out who these people are. So by choosing the right appeal, I need to understand, are you, we have actually five: a person who's a brain thinker, a person who's a gut thinker, a heart thinker, a spirit thinker, and a vision thinker. So a person who's a brain thinker is also either a left brain or a right brain thinker. So if we take these six different types of personality and we pick an appeal for each of those people, we find out that we want to ask specific questions of them in order to make sure that we're getting the most from them. So, for example, if we're dealing with a left brain person, that person deals with facts, logic, data, reasons, and information. And if we pick a right brain person, that person deals with creativity and artistic and thinking outside the box. Clearly, a gut-centric person is going to go by instinct to make decisions. A heart-centric person really wants to be useful. They want to be helpful. So if you're in crisis, or if you need help and you come to them and say, "I'm sorry, I need help," they're more than likely to be able to extend or offer, "I'll be there for you." A person who works from the spirit is somebody who responds when called on shared values, experiences, talents, and aspirations. And then a person on vision is more compelled to actualize a large vision. They are very big ideas. They can see a 360-degree view of what's going on around them, and they're more likely to want to be in the conception phase of any kind of project. I want to be in the beginning when we're really coming up with big ideas, and less about the details. So I can go back and forth here. So if we have influence, and we're going to say that maybe I'll create scarcity around picking a project that I like to that I want to pick these people. So I'm going to create scarcity. I'm going to walk around and tell them I'm only picking 10 people. Now, it's possible I may have somebody that I want on my project. So let's say I do know that out of the 10, I want to have a left brain person on my project who is all about facts, logics, data, making sure they keep track of the project, making sure they keep track of the finances. So if I'm going to appeal to them, I'm going to use those types of terms in order to make sure they understand how valuable they'll be on the project. So if I'm speaking to a left brain person, I might use language like, "I suggest," or "here's why," or "here's why it might matter to you." Here's where you're going to find value out of participating in this project. A right brain person is going to be very artistic, creative. And if we wanted to compel them or persuade them, we'd want to say something like, "We're alike," or "Let me tell you a story from the past about overcoming a challenge just like this." So we're creating relatability. A person who thinks from the gut is, we want to explain to them, here's why we're working like this. Here's what's not working here. And here's what I do like and what I don't like. And here's what I want you to do in exchange. This is what you can do for me, or what I can do for you and what you can do for me. So a gut-centric person is works on instinct, but also wants to know, how is this working and what do I get in exchange for this? A heart-centric person, like we said, is someone who's, if you give them an appeal, which is, "I really need help," they're going to be more than likely to say yes. If you walked up to them and told them, "Here's all the data and the reason why I think you should work with us based on all these spreadsheets and the logic and the data," they're going to be less convinced. And then a person who appeals to the spirit, we would say something like, "Here's where we've been, here's where we believe in, and together we're unstoppable. We trust one another, and today I need your help, so join me on this new adventure." A spirit person likes adventure. And then the last one is a vision person. So this is fun because a vision person is, here is where we can go and what we can make happen together. And here's why it's exciting about the future, and imagine what we can do together. Because a vision person is really grounded in the future vision of how things can look, not necessarily in the present. So as you can see, we have 6 different appeals and 6 different influence techniques. And so if I'm going to build a team and I know that I need certain people on here, I might create scarcity to draw them in. And then once they're in, I might ask them questions to make sure I understand which one of these appeals, which personality type I'm dealing with, and then double down, but then go from the influencing them to getting them into the room to persuading them and getting them to make the decision that I think would be best suited for them. Again, this is less about manipulation and more about making sure I find the relatability between their personality and what resonates best with them, and then making sure they understand why it's worth their while to make sure that they get involved with us. We do want to ask ourselves which ones are going to be the ones that we can step into the easiest. So if I feel comfortable with using a scarcity technique, I might try to use that first. If I feel more comfortable with using a liking technique, which is the car salesman, but we have something in common, I might step into that one. So if we're walking into the unknown, we kind of take our time to evaluate which influence technique is most comfortable for me, because I want to step into my strengths and feel most comfortable if I'm going to use it. And then, like you said, we get to know the people and we ask active questions. If they have something in common with me, clearly, then I'll be able to figure out which way are they thinking, which appeal can I use that's going to really zero in on exactly where they're going to say, yeah, we totally get where you're going. If they're visionary, like a large superstore chain, it is most likely going to have visionary people and also grounded people. So particularly left brain and vision people as well. So we can guess when we're dealing with, so if I'm working with tech startups, I know that I'm working with people who are vision and sometimes spirit, because some of the tech startups are usually for community service. So then I kind of evaluate just by what they're saying to me, are they a left brain or a right brain? And then we kind of zero in on that. And the more you use it, the more used to it you get. I'm going to start asking these active questions. I'm going to zero in on exactly what kind of appeal they are. And then I'm going to go in on it with this is how we can connect. Any question we ask is gauging how interested is that person in, how interested is that person in what I'm trying to convey to them, and how much do I have engagement with them. If they're not engaged and they're not leaning in to learn more, the more I use these techniques, then I'm realizing that they're really disinterested and I might have to work harder, or I might have to let it go. Yep, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it as well. And as always, feel free to email me if you have any questions or concerns or feedback.